views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to BronxTalk. For longer than most will want to remember, community people in the Northwest Bronx have wanted to get that area that runs parallel to the Major Deegan Expressway from Van Cortlandt Park South to West 230th Street, it's about 3/4 of a mile, cleaned up. For folks unfamiliar, this is the area on the southbound side of the highway where Stella D'Oro used to be and the Kingsbridge Crossing Shopping Center now stands. There are environmental and recreational reasons for wanting to make this happen. And happily, the cleanup has been done. And recently, a community board press conference announced that particular happenstance. We have someone from the board on the show tonight to talk about that. But because things are connected, both literally and figuratively, that's not the whole story. The rail line cleanup is linked to important agendas that the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park have for their lake and the park and environs. And so we have someone from the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park here to talk about that too. It's a story about working towards a better Bronx environment and providing more recreational opportunities for all of us. So let's sort it all out. Please join me in welcoming the Chair of Community Board 8's Sanitation and Environment Committee. It is Laura Spalter. Nice to have you with us.
Wonderful to be here.
And the friendly Executive Director of the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park, Christina Taylor. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Laura, let's start with you. So I described this has been a long battle. There is that strip of land, and all of us who get stuck on the Deegan, I can't solve that problem, who get stuck on the Deegan and go down south, look, up where they used to have the clock up there where Stella D'Oro used to be, but there's land there. What's the deal?
It's the CSX right-of-way.
CSX is a rail line.
Yes, this CSX rail line. It's been abandoned for almost 30 years. The last of it was when Stella D'Oro used it for freight, and it's been a blight on the community for many, many years. It was a scene of dumping, vans, trucks, 30 refrigerators.
I was about to say there had to be a refrigerator in there somewhere.
30 refrigerators.
No, we are going to show pictures in a minute,
yes.
So folks upstairs, hang on because we're going to do that.
So as chair of the Environment and Sanitation Committee, we looked at this and we said, this is CSX, this is their responsibility.
Their property.
This is their property.
Even though it's a defunct rail line, it was
Right.
no longer being used, it was still their property.
So starting in January, this past January, I emailed CSX, sent them lots of before pictures, spoke to many, many representatives, constant phone calls, constant pushing, and in April, I got the marvelous call from Rodney Oglesby, the vice president of CSX, that yes, it is theirs, it is their responsibility, and they will clean it up.
Okay, so are we about to cut to the chase that from April till now November, that's how long it took?
Okay.
Oh, things could just not be that simple.
Well, wait. For them, they didn't have a survey. They had a survey. They had to put this job out for bid.
To bid, of
they
course.
had to inspect. They had to deal with all the merchants, BJs, the mall. They had to get access for their big, heavy equipment. They had many things to work out, and they stayed in touch with me on it and gave us updates. And then they started in July.
Okay.
And they were there.
Are we ready now to say, aha?
Yes. Well, I was jumping up and down in April when I heard that they were going to clean it up.
That was a good start.
All right, that was a good start. But I'm a patient person. We've waited 30 years for this cleanup.
Right.
So, I mean, really, what's a few months?
Right.
So in July, they began, and they worked every single day, and they're still there, and they're
Wow.
still working. And
But the press conference was to announce that essentially
Yeah,
it had been
yeah,
cleaned up.
yeah.
Were there any particulars that made this difficult, or really was like any cleanup? And why wouldn't they have just said, okay, it's our responsibility and do it, because they didn't want to spend the money?
I don't know if they had been pushed to do it. I mean, as a community board, we've had an historical interest in that property known as
Right, and we're going to
Putnam
bring
South.
Christina in to find out why in a moment.
In the community board's 197A plan back in 2003, we urged a linear park there. We urged Putnam South become a greenway.
So there is space. This is going to begin to bridge into what Christina does. There is space to do something with that land.
Well, it's 25 to 50 feet wide.
That's pretty significant.
It is. And it's in 2011, the area was ULURPed, and the community board participated in that and voted unanimously so that it could be mapped as parkland. And then in 2017, the same month that they called me that they were going to start cleaning it up, we wrote to Hunter Harrison, he was then brand new CEO of CSX, urging him to do for the citizens of the Bronx what he did for Manhattan with the High Line, that
Why not?
CSX donated that
All right,
land.
so
there's been history.
So, Christina, and I know there are larger issues, and we're going to get to those, but you know what, folks? Let's put the before and after pictures up while Christina is talking. What would you actually see something that could be done? Because that is a rail line, and if you go to Van Cortlandt Lake, for example, or even further north, that is the rail line that goes up, and you went through a whole thing. You removed the tracks. We can talk about the Putnam Trail, which is that trail. But do you think something could be done with that 25 to 50 feet of land?
Definitely. So right now in Van Cortlandt Park, the Putnam Trail ends right at 240th Street. But if we had that CSX property, we could continue the Putnam Trail south all the way down to 230th.
A walking space, a running space,
walking
a
space.
biking space, I guess, would need to be paved.
And may I interject
Yeah, of
that
course.
the plan calls for 3 access points to Broadway, so that at 230th, 234th, 238th, you could jog, walk, bike, and then have lunch, shop on Broadway.
And then go
so
back
the
and just
economic benefits are incredible.
Let's show some of these pictures, because nobody has ever really been there, right?
No,
it's
until
been
the
allowed,
press
yeah.
conference, it's been closed, and it was just a massive.
Yeah, so you can see on the left
Yes,
there,
yes.
there's the before, and then to the right there's after. Let's roll through these relatively quick, folks. Okay, then to the left.
I mean, how could you even see? I'd say there's going to be there could be a trail here, and they'd say, "What? Where?"
A trail, yeah, really.
Yes, yeah.
Well, why don't we clear away all this greenery, and we can. What's next?
Now, we will do green infrastructure. I mean, there's a big environmental component to this whole thing.
We're going to get
Yes,
to
yeah.
Christina about that. And just look at the amount of garbage. Now, do we think people tossed it from their cars?
Yes.
It came, all of the above.
Dumping, all of the above.
My goodness gracious. Keep going. There's one that the folks upstairs know. So the before is to the left, and the after is to the right in this one. It says 233rd Street Underpass. Look at the amount of garbage. And they really cleaned that stuff up. This one is my favorite one. Hold that up for a second.
You could see it's mulched.
Well, but also if you look on the right side, it looks like when they took the Stella D'Oro sign down, they simply threw it over the edge.
Yeah.
They just threw it over the edge.
One way to get rid of that easy.
Might be worth a lot of money to somebody.
Well, I was wondering, do we know who picked it up? I guess they picked it up in the cleanup. Are there any more? There are no more of those pictures. That one's my favorite one. So anyway, Christina, so what could you envision in terms of usability for that land?
In addition to hopefully a bike path, a walking path, we are hoping that we will be able to daylight Tibbetts Brook there. So currently, Tibbetts.
Drum roll, please, because this is a big thing. And actually, Christina knows that I learned about what daylight means because I emceed a conference that you had, and all of a sudden I had to educate myself, so I know all about it. So what does it mean, the daylight Tibbetts Brook Park?
So
Tibbetts Brook Lake, Tibbetts Brook.
Just
right.
Tibbetts Brook.
Okay, sorry.
So daylighting means bringing to the surface. So right now, when you're at Van Cortlandt Lake, at the southern end of the lake, all that water that flows down Tibbetts Brook into Van Cortlandt Lake, right now all that water goes into the city's sewer system. We want to take it out of the city sewer system and have it naturally flow down to the Harlem River.
So let's just talk about that, and in a moment we'll put up the map which really illustrates it. What people may not be aware of, and if you've been to Van Cortlandt Lake and you've done just an incredibly beautiful job, I remember when the lake was this deep and you couldn't do anything, but now you have boating and everything else. It's not, Van Cortlandt Lake is not just a circular lake, a body of water, it's actually a flowing body of water.
It is flowing,
So talk about what happens up top, and now maybe we can put the map up. What happens up top that leads to the lake, and then what you'd like to do. So if we get that map, that would be good.
Okay. So yeah, Tibbetts Brook actually starts in Yonkers. It starts in just north of a park called Redmond Park, and then it goes into Tibbetts Brook Park, which
Do
has
we
a
have
lake.
that map, folks? Here it is. Go ahead.
And then it continues
Let's
down
leave that
through
up.
Van Cortlandt Park. So on this map, where the blue line is, that's Tibbetts Brook within Yonkers, and the yellow line is within the Bronx. So the majority of it is actually in Yonkers, not the Bronx. And then what you're seeing, the yellow there, is the watershed. So that's all the water that feeds into Tibbetts Brook. So any rain that falls on the land there feeds into Tibbetts Brook. And then the red is the watershed for within the Bronx.
The Bronx, so that includes Van Cortlandt Lake and the area.
Lake, yeah, exactly.
So what is the problem with that area that's in the blue line that needs to be dealt with? Give us some real specifics so that the water can flow, and then why does it really matter to anybody?
The main reason it matters is that it's a lot of water. You don't realize how much it is, but every day on a dry day, this is without rain, 4 to 5 million gallons of water are going into the city sewer system. And on a really heavy rainfall like we had a few weekends ago, it can be up to 4 times that amount. So it could be up to 20 million gallons of water that is going into the city sewer system. And in the city, we have what are called combined sewers. So the runoff from the roadways and the water going in from the lake also are combined with your household waste. So every time you flush a toilet, every time you take a shower, all that goes all into the same sewer system.
And that, I think, is what is important, is that we're adding all this water, and nowadays we know, and that brings in, of course, a larger question about climate change and everything else, but we're getting more flooding, the storms are more violent, we're getting more and more water.
Yep.
If we don't have a proper flow, so to speak, then these things will back up.
Exactly.
And people in low-lying areas of the Bronx already know that, because I've been in places, I've been in offices in the South Bronx on a rainy day, and all of a sudden everything is all backed up, and folks who live, especially in lower-lying areas, largely I think in the southern part of the Bronx, you're seeing the effects of that. And so this will get worse unless somebody takes a look. It's crazy how it's all connected, but it actually is connected to that, right?
Yep.
And how much of a problem is it right now? And is it going to be the same problem, or is it going to be getting worse, do you think?
It's a big problem right now, because right now what happens is all the water it feeds into the Broadway sewer. All that water goes down towards Island, where it gets treated before being released into the Harlem River, until it gets to be too much water for it. If there's a heavy rainfall, basically I'd say that the treatment plant has like a panic attack and it shuts down. And it says, I can't handle this water, it closes, and all that water goes directly into the Harlem River without being treated.
And there's your drum roll, folks, and that's why the sewers back up. And you see, gee, every time it rains and it gets disgusting, I mean, we know what goes on. There's a reason for it, and this is the reason. So if I'm clear, and after studying for the show, after moderating a forum, I think I'm finally getting it. What you want to do is separate that whole system so it can stay outside of and not complicate the city's other sewer issues.
Yeah, so we want to remove that 4 to 5 million gallons that's clean water that's going in from the lake into the sewer for no reason. We want to remove that so that the sewers do not overflow as often as they do.
4 to 5 million gallons per
day.
Per day.
Per dry day.
Per dry day.
It's even more when it
And
rains.
then, of course, when we get rainy days.
Which is when it's the problem, is when it rains.
Now, let's go back to Van Cortlandt Lake. What Is that similar to what you're talking about doing with Tibbetts Brook, similar to the kind of process that the lake underwent? I can't even imagine how many, 10 years ago, whatever it was, when the lake was too shallow and it was dredged out and now it became a lake again.
So yeah, they dredged it years ago to make it deeper, and eventually it is going to need to get dredged in again because it is slowly refilling. But it's a different process because that did not really remove any water from the sewer system. But this process, the daylighting would do that.
And so now you're talking about Yonkers and you're talking about the city of New York. Who does this? How much money? Why you know about it? I know about it. They now know about it.
Yep.
Why haven't we done this?
Well, the first obstacle is that the property where we want to daylight is the CSX property that Laura's talking about. And
I told you everything was connected.
and the city doesn't own it.
They are negotiating.
They're under negotiations. They actually just re-entered new negotiations because the first ones they did, CSX said we want $12 million for the property. The Parks Department said we have $2 million. So there was a $10 million gap. So right now they both agreed to hire an independent appraiser to give, hopefully, I'm hoping a value that's a little bit more reasonable than $12 million, so the city can purchase that property, and that would be the first step towards daylighting.
Laura, I don't know if you have a sense of this. I guess two-part question. Number one, in your dialogue with them about cleaning up the area that was just cleaned up, were you able to connect it, or were others able to connect it to this problem? I know you're well aware of it, and say, well, you know, if you're going to do that, let's do the whole deal. Has that dialogue happened?
Well,
yes,
no, because at the press conference, Rodney Oglesby said that it will be a wonderful trail, rails to trail. I mean, that's basically what they have all over. They call it a rails to trail.
Right.
They're aware through all the conversations we've had of how important this is to the community, and they're
the TV
dickering
show
about
we're
the
doing
price.
tonight.
They're dickering about the price.
So it's really just a matter
it's
of...
about the price.
The city would buy the property? Is that what?
They would buy an easement to use this property.
To use the property, some understanding about the property.
Yes.
You know what, I really have to ask, because, you know, it was a very big controversy for a very long time, and I never really heard a full resolve, and that goes up the rail line to the Putnam Trail.
Yeah.
There was, and I can rephrase the controversy, we did a couple of shows on it. The question was whether once those, the slats for the railroad were lifted, what should be? Should that be cemented over to be a bike path?
That's in the park.
That's in the park.
That's in the
right.
park, the Putnam Trail in the park.
So, well, that's why, Christina, so where are we at on that? Is there going to be some pavement, or what is it going to be?
There is a plan to do that. The Parks Department is still trying to make that happen, but right now, the next step is they need approval from the state, the DEC. They need a freshwater wetland permit, and they don't have that yet. So until they have that, they can't move forward.
There were many environmental questions, and I know if I bring it up, my phone's going to ring if people say, well, wait a minute, let's talk about that again. So it's a matter of the state, so at the moment it's in
It's in limbo, I guess you could say.
Do you have to solve that problem before we proceed with the other? In other words, do what, like Laura suggested, at making you know, that little the former CXX rail line by the Deegan cleaned up and make that into a path, or that's a separate issue?
It can be done separately. One won't
Okay,
directly
we'll do
affect the other.
one
yeah.
at a time.
Yeah.
All right, so now back to the purchase of. Does the community board have any thoughts on this or theories?
Well,
on this?
through that resolution that we sent to the CEO, we have been pressuring for CSX to come to the table, to do something for the citizens of the Bronx, to offer a reasonable price. So right now the city is negotiating with CSX, and even the contractor who worked on the line.
It's okay if you don't remember the
Remember her
name.
name, right? But she's the one who's in charge of the project. She spoke to me and said this would be the most amazing greenway. She
Really?
said when she started with all the junk, she just couldn't see it. But then one day she said, I looked at this and I said, I would love to jog here.
And
So they're aware, but I mean, it's again, they're dickering about the price.
where I want to go, when I hear Amazing Greenway in the Bronx, that's when my ears shoot up. So we're talking about, let's say, just south of the lake, because that whole area going north is still being bandied about. Because, but you're talking about from there down to
Van
maybe,
Cortlandt Park South,
Right.
which basically connects to Van Cortlandt
so you could
Park.
have a High Line kind of thing, even though it's next to the highway.
Yes, think of it, Queens, or for how many times you're riding out to Long Island, Queens, and you see people riding, jogging on the west side. In other
Right,
words,
on the West Side Highway. as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I mean, that's the feeling you're going to get. You're not going to see the Deegan because there'll be plantings where you need
Do
to
you have
see.
a sense of how much? I mean, at this point, let's just say, and we'll assume the cleanup is going to go well, of how much money it would cost to turn that into kind of a place that people could travel, you know, and jog or walk. Or,
At this
I
juncture,
mean,
I
we
don't
don't
have it.
really know.
I don't have it.
And then are we going to have the same question about, you know, whether or not it should be paved or not, or nobody wants to
We're
go
not
there
there yet.
We're not there yet.
We're not there. Right now, there's this thick mulch on it. It's very,
So
it's
it-
very
it-
nice. It's keeping the weeds down, and you can walk on it very comfortably. And I never, I mean, I expected them to pick up the garbage, take out the dumping, remove graffiti, but I never expected them to mulch it and make it look
that's
the way
gonna
it
be
is. That's
another
good.
step.
It's good.
Which raises yet another thing. Christina, congratulations, Friends of Van Cortlandt Park, 25 years old.
Thank you.
Have you been there all that many years?
Not all.
It's a side question.
17 of those years.
All
though.
right, there we go. But now you, and I guess you folks put out a master plan that would last another 20 years. So that would be your 45th anniversary, I guess, if you're doing the math. Talk to me about what is in that master plan. I guess this would be part of it, this
This was
daylighting
one
thing.
of them, yeah.
And what is in that master plan, and what can Bronxites look forward to? We're not going to wait for everything till 2034, but you know, what can we look forward to?
So first, I can't take the credit for doing the master plan. That was a Parks Department project, but the Friends have taken it on as something we want to make sure we see happen. And it's basically a bunch of capital projects in the parks, things that can be done to really improve the park for all the park users. So some things that
I'm waiting to hear. Come
going to
on.
be happening in the near future is there will be a new playground at
Where?
the northwest corner of the park.
Which is where?
Marshallou Avenue and Broadway.
Okay.
There'll be a playground there. We actually were one of the Parks Without Borders projects that won. So there'll be a new entrance to the park at 242nd Street, where that ice skating rink was that didn't quite work out.
Oh, that's
They'll
interesting.
be beautifying that entrance to the park. And just south of that, there will be a skate park, and then we do have funding also
Wow.
for a pedestrian bridge.
And these are, well, the pedestrian bridge, oh my goodness, that's a big
That's a long
question.
story.
Yeah. But as far as those other items, let's start with that area. I guess it's on the northern part of where Van Cortlandt Stadium is, and where they, you know, it's now a big yard. There used to be tennis courts there, small tennis courts. What is the plan for that? Is that finally going to be take the cement out and make it a real nice place?
We're hoping, yeah, that some of the cement will come out, that there'll be seating, maybe a art sculpture or a fountain, and then the project will extend to the barbecue area and kind of fix that barbecue area up so that it doesn't have as many flooding issues.
You know, and you talk about a new entrance to the park. I always think about people who go swimming there and everything else. You can't really just walk in, you know what I mean? You got to kind of walk around or
Yeah.
do that kind of thing. How many of these projects actually have money in the budget, or is it one of those things, yeah, we'll do that, but then of course you got to go, somebody's got to pay for it eventually.
Everything I just mentioned was actually the projects that are all funded.
Oh, they're all funded? Well, that's great.
Yeah, there's a lot more projects in the master plan, but the ones I talked about were all
Well,
funded.
that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And one last thing, and then we're going to go back to Laura and just talk about some other community board things. The role of Friends of Van Cortlandt Park, could you characterize why it's so important that we have a Friends of Van Cortlandt Park, and what you're able to do that, you know, frankly, other parks that don't have this active an organization don't get the benefit from?
Yeah, so the Friends, I mean, we are the voice of the park. We can speak up for the park. So for things like you alluded to the filtration plant, we were able to stand up and say, no, we don't want to see that happen, and actually sue the city over it. We're also, we help provide additional programming for the park, educational program, volunteer programs.
Excuse me, you say additional, you put out a ton of programming. Come on, let's be fair. You have ecological programs, education, all kinds of things. Kids are out there all the time.
Volunteer, fixing the
Yeah,
trails.
they do all, she's being so nice. I said she was friendly, right?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, parks are underfunded, and it's not just Van Cortlandt Park, it's every single park. Right now we have, 2 or 3 foresters for the park, and there's over 600 acres of forest, so they can't do everything that needs to get done. So we bring in volunteers and help restore the forest.
You know what I want to do real quick, and that is for people in neighborhoods where they have a park or a playground that they love, but they don't have this kind of organization. What do you have to do to get started? How does it work? Just some advice for folks in other neighborhoods of the Bronx that don't have it. Oh, they're whispering. I don't know.
So we'll do a quick plug. The next Parks Committee meeting for CB8, which is the last Wednesday of November, will be how to start a friends group.
Oh, wow.
And I'll be one of the speakers on that
Oh,
panel.
that's great. That's great.
So you'll have a whole hour and a half of learning how to start your own
And
friends
Partnership
group.
for Parks and
Yep.
all kinds of
They'll all
support
be
groups
part
will
of
be
that.
there.
When-
It's
wow,
a
this is
it's a
by
seminar.
surprise. When
It's
will we do
a it's the first of its kind forum, and people who are already leading voluntarily organizing park groups, they will be speaking.
When and where is that?
It's going to be at Manhattan College
And then in college, the Leo
Leo.
Engineering.
In the Leo Engineering Building.
at
Okay.
7 o'clock.
Great. On what date?
Whatever the last Wednesday of November is.
All right, fair enough. Wow. So then contact the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park or the community board if you want more information
Right.
about that.
Definitely.
Laura, we're almost out of time. What's coming up on your plate? And what's your next fight? Don't ask.
Well, we're organizing an anti-litter campaign,
Great.
working with all the other city agencies, sanitation, DOT, parks. We're always concerned about overflowed baskets, the cleanliness of our 26-step streets in Community Board 8. It's a constant battle.
Right.
Is
that all?
No,
Laura, real quick. You volunteer on the community board. You love what you do. You've been doing it for so many years. You do love it.
I do love it.
Because you're getting something done, and tonight we proved it.
I do love it, and I just want
Real
to
quick,
add.
go
I
ahead.
just want to add that the next meeting of the Environment and Sanitation Committee will be on Wednesday, November 15th, and we have
they're telling
2
me I
guests
gotta
from
go.
DEP,
Oh.
and the focus is on noise.
All right. We'll keep it quiet.
Okay.
Christina Taylor from the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park, thank you. Laura Spalter from Community Board 8, thank you. And if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You send a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out the archives at BronxNet.org. You find Bronx Talk by following the Watch menu on the new BronxNet website. We thank our producer, who's Lindsay Violet. Our director is William Guzman. And guess what? We will see you next week. Good night.
We are together. And for the last 20 years, we have been building on a vision to share our views, our voices on our channels. We are the Bronx. We are BronxNet.